Welcome, class, to the Intro to Java Programming. In this lesson, we will review the switch statement used in a decision-making process. We will cover the syntax and keywords used, how it is similar to an if and if-else statement, along with some rules and guidelines to follow. The switch statement is littered with controversy. Let's check it out. The switch statement is used to perform one of several possible actions. Typically, one value is obtained based on another value. The switch statement is an alternative to several else-if statements. Let's take a look at the syntax and a simple example of a switch statement to clarify some initial questions. The keyword switch is used to start the switch statement. In parentheses is an expression to test. This expression must be a byte, short, char, int, string, or enum data type. We will cover the enum in an upcoming lesson. There are curly braces to hold the remainder of the switch statement. Next is a case statement and an expression value to be compared with the switch expression. After the expression is a colon. Here we are testing CHN with USA. There is no match, so we move to the next case statement. JOR is not a match. Here we have a case for CHN. This is a match. When a match is found, the following code block is executed until a break statement is encountered or until the end of the switch statement. Here the variable country name is set to China. The next line is the keyword break. This command is used to exit the switch block. There should always be a break statement at the end of each case statement unless you have a very specific need. If no matches are found for all the case statements, an optional default statement will be executed. Yes, as I mentioned in the switch definition, it can be used as an alternative to multiple else-if statements. Here's the same switch statement using the if, else-if, and else statement. Let's compare a few things in this side-by-side view. The switch and if keywords start each command. The switch will compare the variable country abbreviation with each case expression. The if statement will compare the country abbreviation with an expression, and each else if will compare the country abbreviation variable with an expression. Here you can see how each comparison from the switch lines up with the if and else if statements. If no match is found, the switch will drop into the default block, and the if will drop into the else block. Each case statement has a block of code that will execute if true. Each if and else if statement have a block of code that will execute if true. Here you can see the matching code blocks for the switch and if statements. The same is true for the code blocks for the default and else keywords. Can a case statement have a relational operator? The answer is no. Let's cover a few rules and guidelines for the switch statement. The value for a case must be a constant or a literal. You are not allowed to use variables, expressions, or operators like x less than 5. The data type of a case value must be the same as the switch variable. Duplicate case values are not allowed. Case statements will be tested in top to bottom order. Case statements do not have to be in order. You could test 1, then 3, then 2. The break statement is optional for every code block. If the code block for a case statement does not have a break, the code block for the next case will be executed as well. The default statement is optional. The default can appear anywhere inside the switch block, but it is recommended to place it after all the case statements. There is no minimum number of case statements required, but it doesn't make sense to have 2 or less. If so, just use an if-else statement. With that being said, there is no maximum number of allowed case statements. It is in your best interest to not have too many cases. 10 cases might be too many. 20 cases is likely too many. 50 cases is too many. Instead of restricting the number of cases to a specific range, it is safer to have a switch statement with stable or unchanging number of possible cases. The number of days in a week is unchanging. The number of months in a year is unchanging. The number of states in the United States is unchanging, but it is too many. The number of movies playing at the local theater is constantly changing from week to week. Building a case statement for each new movie would require many code changes. Removing case statements for movies that are no longer playing would require many code changes. The use of a switch statement for cases that will change is not a good idea. Inside each case code block, you're allowed to have 0 lines. I will show you a fall-through example later. There is no maximum number of lines, but I strongly encourage you to keep it very low. like 2 or less. Being that a switch statement is typically used to obtain a value or a variable from another value, you will need one line to hold the newly obtained value and another line for the break keyword. Let me explain these examples. As seen before, I could provide a country abbreviation code to the switch statement, and the case statement is used to obtain the full country name. In an adventure game, you could encounter a monster like a goblin, skeleton, or dragon. The case statement is used to obtain a variable that is the class object for that specific monster. The case statement should not have many lines of code. This breaks many Coach Joe rules that will be covered later. For now, remember to keep the number of code lines very low. The use of a map is suited for providing a key and getting a value in return. In Lesson 12, we saw an example of country code abbreviation that returned a full country name. And since the key can be one data type and the value can be another data type, a monster name could be provided and a monster object could be returned. A map would be a good alternative to a switch statement in many situations. The map also allows for many entries where the number of cases in a switch statement should be limited. The switch statement is not a bad statement, but with so many restrictions and better choices, it should be limited. Coach Joe rule number 16 states the use of a switch statement may be an indication of poor design. Using a switch statement in a small or personal project may be acceptable. If the project was written with the intention of rarely being changed or updated, a switch statement is a quick way to process many cases. If the project is intended for company or customer use, I strongly recommend a different approach. Let's go to our Basics project in IntelliJ, close any open class tabs. Let's navigate to the Decisions test package, create a new class called Switch Test. Let's make some space. Copy in this first test. Import in these classes. This test will find a specific case and verify the result. Here is a string value for country abbreviation we want to find. We will hold the result in the country name variable. The switch statement is looking for the value of the country abbreviation variable. In this case, we're looking for CHN. Here are all the case statements. The cases will be processed in top to bottom order. JOR is not a match. CHN is a match. The code block for this case statement will be executed. Remember, the break is used to exit the switch statement. In the assert statement, we will test for China as the country name. If we run this test, it passes. This test will show the fall-through option where there is no break statement in the case code block. Here's a string value for a country abbreviation we want to find. We will hold the result in the country name variable. Here is the switch code block. Here are all the case statements. Notice that this case has no code block if true. In this test, we are looking for US as the country abbreviation. Time for a Coach Joe Challenge question. What is the rule for executing the code block for this case statement? Correct. If the code block for the case statement does not have a break, the code block for the next case will be executed. The next case code block will continue to be executed until the break is found or until the switch statement ends. This test will prove that the case for US is executed and the code block for USA was executed because no prior break was found. The assert will test country name to verify the value is United States. Let's run this test. And it passes. In this final test, the country abbreviation will not be found and the default code block will be executed. Here is the complete test. Remember when I recommended to limit the number of cases? Notice how much vertical space is used. This test only has 7 cases. Imagine how many lines of code would be needed if we had 20 or 50 or more cases. Here we set the country abbreviation to FRA. Here is the switch code block. No case statement has a literal value for FRA. This means the default code block will be executed. The assert will verify the value not found is the result. Let's run this test. And it passes. Here's a summary of all the test code we wrote for this lesson. You should now have an understanding of the switch statement and keywords used in a decision-making process. Some rules and guidelines were provided along with code examples. Remember, the switch statement can be used in specific situations, but often there is a better approach. Your optional homework assignment is to create a test with a switch statement. Supply a number from 1 to 7 that represents each day of the week. In the next lesson, we'll discuss the for loop. Remember, future senior developers, make it work, prove it works, then make it better. Ready? Break!